nothing but it is a space in a database. Okay, database server which stores the metadata of the objects. Okay, fine, which helps to store the metadata. So what is metadata actually? Metadata is
the data of, I mean, like that master the transaction data of objects.
Yeah, data about data is called metadata. Okay,
Yes.
fine. So you have designed some objects. Okay, fine.
Okay.
You should know the data about that object. Okay, so when the object was created, when it was executed, whether the execution was success or fail. So all these data are called metadata. Okay, so the information about the data is called metadata. Okay, so this should be stored in a repository. Clear? So repository is also called as metadata. Okay, so manaku ardham avalante repository is the space in a database which helps to store the metadata. Okay, so in SAP data services we require 3 types of repositories. Okay, fine. So 3 types of repositories are required. So the first repository is local repository, second one is central repository, and third one is profiler repository. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have to remember, basically you'll have 3 repositories when you are going to work with data services. Okay, local repository, central repository, and profiler repository. Okay, so now we shall see clearly what is local repository, what is central repository, and what is profiler repository. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So local repository, fine. So local repository is used to store the metadata of the objects, okay, which you have developed in your data services designer. Okay, so local repository is used to store the metadata of the objects designed in the DS designer by the developer. Okay, clear?
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Bharat. Okay, so what is local repository? So local repository is required to store the metadata of the objects which we design in the data services designer. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yes.
So next, central repository. Okay, so central repository. See, basically if you are working in a project, so you'll have a team, right? Fine. So in team you'll have some 3 to 5 developers. Okay, so each and every developer will have their own designer, right? That means their own local repository. Okay, clear? Fine. So one more thing I forgot to say is here, 1 minute.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, see here, local repository is used to store the metadata of the objects designed in the DS designer by the developers, right? Okay, so one thing you have to remember is to log into the DS designer, data services designer, okay, by a developer, he requires a local repository. Okay, because through local repository credentials only you can log in into the designer. Okay, Fine. So the main important thing you have to remember is to log in into designer, you require local repository. Okay, that is mandatory, and with that local repository username and password details only you can log in into the designer. Okay, fine.
Could you once again repeat that?
Yeah, to log on to the SAP DS designer, okay, we require a local repository and its credentials. Okay, fine.
Okay.
So
Yes.
if you have one local repository dedicated to you, okay, and if you know its credentials, then only you can log in into the data services designer. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yes.
So next, central repository. So as we were discussing, in a team you'll have some around 4 to 5 guys with you. Okay, so each and every guy will have a local repository to log in into the designer. Okay, so in a project each and every person will not work with same object, right? Okay, so each and every person will have different jobs to design or different works to do. Okay, but all these works should be shared by all the team members, right or not? Okay,
Yeah.
so to share those codes or objects we require a space.
Central.
Okay, so that is central repository. Okay, so central repository simply acts like a shared folder
Shared for
between local
all local
repo
repositories.
users, that means developers. Okay, fine, clear. So this,
Like individual any
sorry, individual,
individually any users can create objects in local repository, but they need to save it in central repository,
yes,
right? Or else it automatically gets saved in the
no,
central
no,
repository.
the guy should be move that code to central repository. Suppose you and me are working in a project. Okay, so I've created job 1 and you have created job 2. Okay, so I want to share my job 1 with you. Okay, so for that we need a shared folder between us. Okay, so I have to move that to that shared folder, and you should have access to that shared folder, then only you can get that job 1 to your local repository. Okay, so that shared folder we use is central repository. Okay, so it's not a shared folder, just I'm comparing with the shared folder which we use in our networks. Okay, fine. So central repository is used to share the, it simply I'm saying
Files.
acts like, okay, shared folder. So I'll just put it as next sentence. Okay, so just this is used to share the codes or objects. Okay, simple codes ni objects antanu ikkada. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Objects between multiple local repos or local repo users. Okay, we can say anything. Clear? Fine.
Yes.
So it simply, so to get a clear understanding on this, so it simply acts like a shared folder between local repository users. Okay, clear?
Yeah. Yes.
Fine. So what is the use of central repository is, it is used for multi-user environment. Okay, so this is the first main thing, and it is used for version management. Okay, clear?
What is this version management?
Yeah, so multi-user environment is about what we have discussed till now. Okay, so to create a multi-user environment, that means we are creating an environment in which multiple users will work. Okay, so for that we require a central repository to share the objects between multiple local repository users. So version management is nothing but, so you have designed object today. Okay, fine.
Okay.
So that will be automatically known as version 1, right? For example, it's a version 1, and you have modified that job or object after 10 days. Okay, fine.
Yeah, okay.
So in designer, in local repository in designer, every time only the updated version will be stored. Okay, once you update, once you modify your job, okay, the previous thing will be
Oh,
changed. You will have
deleted.
only the thing which you have modified. Okay, but
Yeah.
what you have modified is not a good option and you want to go back to the previous design. Okay, then basically what you have to do, you have to remove, or you have to change all the modifications which you have done and come back to the previous thing or previous design. Okay, so that change, that wastes your time. So because of that your time will be wasting. Okay, and everything will
Yes.
be lost for you, right? So
Yeah.
if there is an option of storing each and every version, okay, then that will
Yeah.
be very easy for you, right? So the job which you have designed first time will be, should be stored, and which have modified after 10 days also should be stored. Then
In the version management.
that will be a very advantage for you, right? So in central
Okay.
repository what happens is, when you move an object to central repository for the first time, it will store as version 1. Okay, fine.
Okay.
So in the same way, if you continuously move and again take it back, move and take it back, okay, so it will not delete the previous versions. Okay, it will store the previous versions and also new versions of your objects as well. Okay, so because
Yeah.
of that what happens is, whenever the new version is not required, or if you feel that that is not good, you can go back to the previous
You can
version
go back
and
to
use that. Okay,
yes.
clear? So that is version management.
Yeah.
That means it keeps history of all your objects, it keeps all the versions of your objects. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So
Yes.
that is why we are using
Version management.
central repository. Okay, it is used for multi-user
Yeah.
environment and version management. Okay, the main thing you have to remember
Yes.
is, in data services designer you cannot maintain versions, only latest version will be stored. Okay, so if you want to maintain each and every version of the object, then also you have to go to the central repository. Okay, fine,
Yeah.
clear, got it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what central repository. Okay, fine. So in data services, central repository is of two types. Okay, you'll have
Yeah.
two types of central repository. One is secure central repository, okay, and second one is unsecured central repository.
Okay.
Okay, give me a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll have two types of central repositories. Okay, one is secured central repository and unsecured central repository. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so by the name itself you can get clear idea. Secure central repository is, see, central repository is used to share the objects between local repository users, right? So secured means,
Yeah.
so it should be available only to some local repositories, those who have access to that central repository.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you are creating a secure central repository, so for the central repository you will give access to only some local users, okay, who are able to move the objects and get the objects. Okay, Fine. So you'll create a group, and for that group you will create a secure central repository. So other than that group, no other guys can access that objects. Okay. If it is unsecured, what happens is each and every user can access the objects present in the unsecured central repository. Got it? So that is the difference between secured and unsecured. Okay. So this is completely about central repository. Okay. So next is profiler repository. Okay. So we have already seen what is meant by profiling, right? In the last class. So profiling is data assessment activity which is used to measure and analyze your data. Okay. Fine. So as I said, you have a inbuilt data profiler tool in data services. Okay. Fine. So when you are performing profiling on a particular table or file, so that will be considered as a profiling task. Okay. Fine. So those profiling tasks metadata should be stored in a repository. Okay. So for that we require a separate repository which is called profiler repository. Okay. Fine. Profiler repository is used to store the metadata.
Like like profiling activity should be done by SAP information steward, right?
Not. As I said, you can perform 20% of profiling using data services, right? So to perform that profiling, you have data services.
So for that, 20% of that.
Okay. So in data services, you have inbuilt data services profiler tool. So when you are using that data services profiling tool, okay, when you are performing the profiling tasks, those profiling tasks metadata should be stored in a separate repository. Okay, so that repository is profiler repository. Okay, so profiling tasks performed in DS Designer. Okay, got it? So this is all about repositories. Okay, you have three types of repositories in data services. One is local, central, and profiler. Okay, so local is a repository which is used to store the metadata of the objects and as well as the objects, okay, which you develop in data services designer. Okay, so central repository is completely used for multi-user environment and version management. Okay,
management.
Profiler repository is used to store the metadata of the profiling task performed in your DS design. Clear?
Yes.
So that is about a repository. Okay, and the main thing you have to remember is to log in into data services designer, you require a local repository and its credentials. Okay, so you cannot log in with central repository credentials, you cannot log in with profiler repository credentials into the designer. You can log in with only local repository credentials into the data services designer. Okay, got it?
While logging into SAP DS, we need to log in into BODS designer only, right?
Yeah, SAP DS designer I have shown it in the last class, right?
Whatever we will do the work, we need to do in the designer only.
Yeah, the developer completely works in the designer. Here you have to give a username and password. Okay, when you give username and password, all the local repositories present in your network will be displayed here. Okay, so your dedicated local repository, when you select, it will ask password for that local repository. Then only it will log in into the designer.
So that the SAP BODS designer credentials and the local repository credentials would be same, right?
Yeah, local repository credentials and the SAP data services designer credentials will be same. Okay, got it? So you'll get to know in next two classes clearly about that. Okay, fine. Fine. So next thing in the architecture is services. Okay, so you have to know about services. Okay, see, for any software compulsory you'll have services. Okay, so services are mainly used to process or execute your codes which you develop, right?
Created.
Even though it's a C program or SQL or anything. Okay. So to process those things or to process those queries or codes, you need services. Okay. So in data services, you'll have three types of services. One is job service, job server. Second one is data engine, and third one is access server. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
So job service, sorry, before seeing about job service.